My husband's phone rang at 2:14 in the morning. It was not a text message or a notification. It was a call. The kind of call that only brings bad news or reveals secrets that hide in the dark. I was wide awake instantly, my heart hammering against my ribs, but I lay perfectly still. Beside me, Julian was snoring, the deep, rhythmic sound of a man who slept with a clear conscience, or perhaps no conscience at all. I watched the screen light up the dark room. It was an unsaved number, a Virginia area code. My hand hovered over the device. My gut, that instinct that had kept me alive when my parents died and left me to navigate the sharks of the corporate world alone, screamed at me to answer it. Julian shifted in his sleep, mumbling something incoherent. I slid the button and brought the phone to my ear, not saying a word. I just listened. Silence. Then a woman's voice, sharp and impatient. "Put my husband on the phone." I froze. The air in the bedroom suddenly felt thin. I looked at Julian, his face peaceful in the pale light. I whispered into the receiver, keeping my voice steady. "I think you have the wrong number. This is Julian's phone." The woman laughed. It was a cold, humorless sound that sent a chill down my spine. "I do not have the wrong number, Jasmine. I know exactly who you are. You are the little placeholder he keeps in Atlanta. Now wake him up. Tell him Chloe is waiting to hear why he transferred $50,000 out of our joint account yesterday without asking me." My blood ran cold. She knew my name, she knew about money, and she called him her husband. I felt a wave of nausea, but I forced it down. I needed to be sure. I needed proof before I burned this house down. "You are lying," I said, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts. "Julian is my husband. We have been married for 2 years. The woman on the other end sighed, sounding bored. "Honey, he has been playing you. If you want proof, ask him why his social security number ends in 4589. Ask him why he has a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on his lower back. Now put him on the phone or I will call the police and report him for theft." She recited his social security number. She knew the birthmark I kissed every morning. The phone slipped from my fingers and hit the mattress. Julian stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He looked at me then, at the lit phone screen, and panic flashed across his handsome face. Before I tell you exactly how Julian tried to explain away a second wife and a missing $50,000, and how I discovered that my entire marriage was a federal crime, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. And if you have ever been the only responsible person in a room full of liars, hit that like and subscribe button. You are going to want to see how I make them pay. Julian snatched the phone from the bed, his eyes wide. He looked at the screen, saw the number, and immediately rejected the call. He tossed the phone onto the nightstand with a little too much force and turned to me, forcing a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "Who was that?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. He rubbed his face, putting on a performance of an exhausted man. "Just a spam call, babe. Some automated bot trying to sell car insurance. You know how it is. Why are you awake? You have to be up early for your data entry gig. Do not you." He tried to reach for me to pull me into his arms, but I pulled back. "A spam caller who knows your social security number, Julian. A spam caller who said her name is Chloe. A spam caller who called you her husband." Julian froze. For a split second, I saw the mask slip. I saw the calculation, the fear, but then just as quickly it was replaced by anger. He sat up, throwing the covers off. "You are being paranoid again, Jasmine. This is exactly what I am talking about. You sit in this house all day typing numbers into a computer for pennies, and you let your imagination run wild. Nobody called me husband. You were probably half asleep and dreaming. You really need to see a therapist about this insecurity. It is exhausting." He was gaslighting me. He was looking me dead in the eye and telling me my reality was a lie. I watched him storm into the bathroom and slam the door. He turned on the shower to drown out any further questions. I sat there in the dark, trembling. Not from fear, but from rage. He thought I was stupid. He thought I was just Jasmine, the poor orphan with the dead-end job, who should be grateful he looked in her direction. He had no idea he was lying to the owner of the largest logistics firm on the East Coast. I did not sleep the rest of the night. I lay there listening to him pretend to sleep, planning my next move. When the sun came up, I went downstairs to make breakfast just like I always did. I needed to maintain the routine. I needed them to think I was still the compliant, clueless wife. By 8 o'clock, Julian came down dressed in his best suit. He kissed me on the cheek as if nothing had happened. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. It was Brad, his brother-in-law. Brad was a mid-level manager at a hedge fund, a man who wore expensive suits he could barely afford, and looked at me like I was something he stepped in on the sidewalk. "Good morning, sunshine," Brad sneered as he walked into my kitchen, helping himself to the coffee I had brewed. He did not ask. He never asked. He looked at the spread of eggs and bacon and wrinkled his nose. "Is this organic?" "You know Julian has a sensitive stomach. We cannot have him getting sick before the big pitch today." I gripped the spatula tight. "It is organic, Brad. I bought it with my own money." Brad laughed a bark of a sound. "Your money? That is cute. You mean the pocket change you make typing spreadsheets? Let us be real, Jasmine. Julian pays for the roof over your head. The least you can do is buy decent eggs." Julian walked in adjusting his tie. He did not defend me. He never defended me. He just grabbed a piece of toast and winked at Brad. "Don't be too hard on her, Brad. She had a rough night. Hearing voices, thinking secret wives are calling me at 2 a.m. Brad burst out laughing, spraying crumbs onto the counter. "Oh wow, the crazy ex-girlfriend vibes are strong today, huh?" Jasmine, seriously. "You landed a guy like Julian. He is a catch. He is out there making real deals, building an empire, and you are acting like a jealous teenager. You should be grateful. Most women with your background would be lucky to even get a date with a Washington, let alone marry one." My background. That was their code word for black and poor. They thought because I drove a 2015 Toyota and wore clothes from Target that I was destitute. They thought because I never talked about my family, I had no one. They didn't know I had changed my last name to protect myself from people exactly like them. I placed the plate of eggs in front of Julian. He didn't say thank you. He just ate talking to Brad about a new real estate development he was trying to sell. "I need you to sign some papers later," Julian said between bites, not looking at me. "Just a refinance thing. We need to pull some equity out of the house to invest in this project. It is a guaranteed 10 times return." Brad verified it. I froze. The house. This house was the only thing I had bought in my own name before we got married. I had paid cash for it using a shell company so no one would know my net worth. I had put Julian on the deed last year because he begged me, saying it would help his credit score. "I'm not signing anything, Julian," I said quietly. The room went silent. Brad stopped chewing. Julian put his fork down slowly. "Excuse me," Julian asked, his voice dropping an octave. "I said no. You are not taking a loan out on my house." "My house?" Julian stood up, towering over me. He used his height to intimidate a tactic that used to work. "This is our house, Jasmine, and I am the man of this house. I make the financial decisions. You just type the numbers. Do not forget your place. You are being emotional." "Jasmine," Brad chimed in, leaning back in his chair with a smug grin. "Look, if you do not understand how leverage works, just say that. Julian is trying to build generational wealth here. You are holding him back. This is why you will always be poor. You have a poverty mindset." I looked at them, two mediocre men in cheap suits playing at being masters of the universe. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the deed to the 40-story building I owned in downtown Atlanta in their faces. But I didn't. I needed to know about Chloe. I needed to know how deep the rot went. "Fine," I said, lowering my eyes in mock submission. "I am sorry. I am just tired. I will look at the papers tonight." "Good girl," Julian said, patting me on the head like a dog. He grabbed his briefcase. "We are going to be late. Clean this up, will you? And maybe take a nap. You look terrible." They left laughing as they walked to Julian's leased BMW. I waited until the car disappeared down the driveway. Then I locked the door. I walked into the home office, the small room they thought I used for data entry. I sat down at my computer. It wasn't a standard setup. It was a high-powered rig with dual monitors and a secure connection to the databases I had access to as the majority shareholder of Artemis Logistics. I didn't open Excel. I opened the Federal Records search portal. I typed in Julian Washington. The screen loaded and my world shattered. There it was, a marriage certificate dated 6 months ago, Clark County, Nevada, Julian Washington and Chloe Kensington, Kensington. The name hit me like a physical blow. Chloe Kensington wasn't just some random woman. She was the daughter of Senator Robert Kensington. Julian hadn't just cheated on me, he had married into a political dynasty. He was living a double life. I dug deeper. I pulled up his travel records. Every other week when he said he was in New York for business, he was in D.C. He had an apartment there, a lease in his name. But that wasn't the worst part. I accessed the county recorder's office for our house. My hands shook as I clicked on the latest filing. A mortgage. A second mortgage for $200,000 taken out 3 weeks ago. I stared at the document. There was a signature at the bottom, Jasmine Washington. It was my name, but it wasn't my handwriting. He had forged my signature. He had stolen $200,000 of equity from the home I bought with my inheritance money. I traced the funds. The money didn't go into his business. It didn't go into an investment. It went to a jeweler in Georgetown. I clicked on the invoice. A 4-carat yellow diamond ring, engraved with the words, "To Chloe, my only love." I sat back in my chair, the silence of the house deafening. I felt a tear roll down my cheek, but it wasn't sadness. It was the pure, distilled realization of betrayal. Julian wasn't just a cheater. He was a thief. He was a criminal. And Brad knew. They all knew. They were laughing at me while eating my food, calling me poor, while spending my money to fund his life with a senator's daughter. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Julian. Message. Baby. I forgot to tell you. I need to go to D.C. for a few days. Emergency client meeting. Love you. I looked at the text. Then I looked at the marriage certificate on my screen. I typed a reply, "Okay, honey. Travel safe." I put the phone down. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. Confrontation is for people who want apologies. I didn't want an apology. I wanted total destruction. I opened a new email and typed in the address of my family's lawyer, the most feared shark in Atlanta, a man who charged $1,000 an hour just to pick up the phone. Subject: activation of Protocol 4, target Julian Washington. I hit send. Then I stood up and walked to the closet. I pushed aside the rack of cheap polyester blouses I wore to play the part of the struggling wife. Behind them, hidden in a garment bag at the very back, was a silk blazer from Paris and a pair of red-bottom heels. Julian wanted a wife who knew her place. He was about to find out that my place wasn't in the kitchen. It was at the head of the table signing his eviction notice. But before I could even start packing a bag to head to D.C., my computer chimed with an urgent alert. It was a notification from my bank, not the joint account with $50 in it, my real bank, the offshore trust. Attempted access detected. Location Atlanta, GA. IP address. The IP address of this house. My heart stopped. Someone else was in the house, or someone had installed spyware on my network. I spun around in my chair. The door to the office, which I had locked, slowly creaked open. Standing there wasn't Julian. It wasn't Brad. It was my mother-in-law, Patricia. She was holding a spare key in one hand and a stack of my private financial statements in the other. Papers I thought were hidden in the floor safe. She looked at the papers, then at me, and a smile spread across her face that was more terrifying than anything I had ever seen. "Well, well, well, Jasmine," she whispered, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. "It looks like you have been holding out on us. $40 million, and here I thought you were just a nobody." She took a step closer, her eyes gleaming with greed. "We need to talk about my son's share, do not we?" I looked at the woman who had made my life a living hell for 2 years. She thought she had caught me. She thought this was leverage. She had no idea she had just walked into the lion's den. The silence in the house after my mother-in-law left was heavy, suffocating. It was the kind of silence that precedes a storm. I sat at the kitchen island, my hands wrapped around a mug of cold tea, staring at the granite countertop. I knew what was coming. I could feel the vibrations of the garage door opening beneath my feet. Julian was home. I did not move when I heard the heavy footsteps coming up the hallway. I did not fix my hair or smooth out my shirt. I just waited. The door to the kitchen swung open, hitting the wall with a loud thud. Julian stood there, his tie loosened, his face flushed with a mixture of alcohol and rage. He did not look like the charming real estate mogul he pretended to be on Instagram. He looked desperate. He did not say hello. He marched across the kitchen, reached into his briefcase, and pulled out a crumpled document. He threw it onto the island in front of me. The paper slid across the smooth surface and stopped just inches from my hand. "Read it." He spat, his voice thick with accusation. I looked down. Bold red letters at the top of the page screamed one word: foreclosure. I felt a spark of genuine confusion mixed with my anger. Foreclosure. That was impossible. I had bought this house with cash 2 years ago. I wired the money myself from the Artemis Holdings account. There was no mortgage. There was no bank to foreclose on us. Unless. My mind raced back to the discovery I had made earlier on the computer. The forged signature. The second mortgage. Julian had taken a loan out on a house he did not own using a power of attorney I never signed, and now he had stopped paying that loan. I looked up at him, keeping my face blank. "What is this, Julian? What is this?" He laughed, a manic, high-pitched sound. "You are asking me what this is. This is the result of your incompetence, Jasmine. This is what happens when you drain me dry. The bank is taking the house. We have 30 days to vacate." I stared at him, marveling at the audacity. I drained him dry. I paid the electricity bill. I paid for the groceries. I paid for the gas in my own car. The only thing Julian paid for was his image. "I do not understand," I said, my voice quiet, baiting him. "I thought you said business was booming. I thought the Midtown project was a gold mine. How can we be losing the house? And why is there a mortgage? You told me you were handling the property taxes." Julian slammed his hand on the counter, making the mugs rattle. "Do not play dumb with me. You think I do not know. You think I do not see the Amazon packages. You think I do not see the organic food in the fridge. The extra data on the phone plan. You bleed money, Jasmine. You live like a princess while I am out there busting my back trying to keep this roof over our heads." He was projecting. Every accusation was a confession. He was the one with the leased BMW. He was the one buying 4-carat diamonds for a second wife. But he stood there, pointing a shaking finger at me, trying to make me believe that my purchase of store-brand almond milk was the reason we were homeless. "So what now?" I asked, leaning back. "If it is my fault, Julian, surely you have a plan. You always have a plan." He huffed, adjusting his jacket, pacing the length of the kitchen. His eyes darted around the room, avoiding mine. "I do have a plan. I fixed your mess. But I need you to do one thing, just one small thing to save us." He stopped pacing and pulled another document from his jacket pocket. He smoothed it out on the counter, his demeanor shifting instantly from aggression to a sickly sweet manipulation. "I spoke to a lender, a private equity guy. He is willing to give us a bridge loan, enough to pay off the arrears and keep the house. But because my credit is tied up in the business, he needs a guarantor. He needs collateral." I looked at the document. It was a loan agreement, but the collateral listed was not the house. It was the account number for the Nana Rose Education Fund, my grandmother's fund, the only money Julian knew I had. When Nana Rose passed away, she left me $50,000. It was a modest sum, meant for me to go back to school or start a small business. I had told Julian about it when we first met, back when I thought he was safe. I told him I never touched it because it was the last piece of her I had. He wanted me to liquidate it. He wanted to take the last $50,000 he thought I possessed. "You want me to sign over Nana Rose's money?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Julian, that is for my master's degree." I promised her. "Education." Julian scoffed, leaning in close. "Jasmine, look at you. You are 31 years old doing data entry. You are not going to get a master's degree. You are not going to be a CEO. Let us be realistic. That money is sitting there gathering dust while we are about to be on the street." He walked around the island and stood behind me, placing his hands on my shoulders. I could feel the heat radiating off him. He squeezed his grip just a little too tight to be affectionate. "Think about it, babe. If we lose this house, where will you go? You have no family. You have no friends who can take you in. You will be out on the street with your boxes of old clothes. I can survive. I can stay at a hotel. I can stay with Brad. But you need me. You need this house." He was threatening me with homelessness. He was weaponizing my isolation, the isolation he had carefully cultivated over the last 2 years by driving away my friends. I stood up, sliding out from under his grip. I walked to the window and looked out at the driveway. "And if I sign this," I asked, not turning around. Will the 50,000 cover everything? It will cover the immediate debt, Julian lied, smoothly. I can feel the lie in the air. $50,000 would barely cover the interest on the loans he likely had. He just wanted the cash. He probably needed it to pay off Chloe's credit card bills or to keep his Ponzi scheme afloat for another week. Yes, it covers everything he said. Just sign it, Jasmine. Do it for us. Do it to show me you are actually committed to this marriage. Unless you want me to think you are selfish. The word hung in the air. I turned around to face him. He was holding a pen out to me, a Mont Blanc pen I had bought him for his birthday. I took the pen. I looked at the loan document. I saw the terms. High interest. Predatory. If I were the broke girl he thought I was, this signature would ruin me for a decade. I am not signing this, Julian, I said, placing the pen down on the paper. The change in him was instantaneous. The mask of the concerned husband vanished. His face twisted into a snarl. He swept the mug of tea off the counter. It shattered on the floor, splashing dark liquid onto my white socks. "What did you say to me?" He stepped forward, towering over me. "I said no. I am not giving you my grandmother's money to pay for a mortgage you took out behind my back." I did not mean to say the second part. It slipped out. Julian froze. His eyes narrowed. "You went through my papers. You violated my privacy. You committed fraud," I shouted back, finally, letting some of the anger surface. "You forged my signature." He grabbed my arm. His fingers dug into my flesh. "Listen to me, you ungrateful little brat. I did what I had to do. I am building an empire. Sometimes you have to move assets around. You would not understand because you have a poverty mindset. You are small. You think small." He pulled me closer, his face inches from mine. I could smell the stale whiskey on his breath. "You think you have a choice? You think you can just say no? Look around you, Jasmine. Everything you see belongs to me. This life belongs to me. You are nothing without me." He released my arm with a shove, causing me to stumble back against the refrigerator. "You are going to sign that paper," he hissed. "You are going to sign it because if you do not, I will make sure you lose a lot more than a house. I will ruin you. I will have you declared incompetent. I will tell the court you are unstable. Brad knows a judge. We will have you committed before you can pack a bag." He picked up the document and held it in front of my face. "You are not a partner in this marriage, Jasmine. You are just a mouse living in a trap I built. You have been eating my cheese for 2 years. Now the trap is shutting." He slammed the paper against the fridge door, pinning it there with his hand next to my head. "Sign it," he whispered, his voice trembling with contained violence. "Sign it or get out. Get out and see how long you last in the real world without me." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had vowed to love and cherish. I saw the monster underneath the suit. He truly believed he owned me. He truly believed I was helpless. He thought I was a mouse. He had no idea he was standing in a cage with a tigress. I took a deep breath. I reached out and took the pen from his hand. My hand was steady. "Fine," I said softly. Julian exhaled, a triumphant smirk appearing on his lips. "See, was that so hard? Daddy knows what is best." I leaned the paper against the fridge, but I did not sign my name. I wrote 4 words across the signature line in bold capital letters. I wrote, "Talk to my lawyer." Then I dropped the pen on the floor. Julian looked at the paper. He looked at the words. Confusion clouded his face. "What is this? Who is your lawyer?" "You do not have a lawyer. You use LegalZoom." I stepped around him. I didn't run. I didn't flinch. I walked to the hallway closet and pulled out the suitcase I had packed while he was arguing with Brad earlier. "I am leaving Julian," I said, pulling the handle of the suitcase up. He laughed, a nervous disbelief-filled laugh. "Leaving? Where are you going to go?" "The Motel 6. "You have no money. I checked your account. You have $300. I opened the front door. The night air rushed in cool and crisp. "Keep the house, Julian," I said, looking back at him one last time. "You are going to need the shelter when the FBI comes for you." I walked out the door and down the steps. Jasmine. "Come back here. "You cannot walk out on me, Jasmine." I heard him screaming from the doorway. I heard the desperation in his voice. He wasn't screaming because he loved me. He was screaming because he needed that $50,000. I pressed the unlock button on my key fob, but I didn't walk toward the beat-up Toyota Camry parked in the driveway. I walked past it. I walked to the curb where a black Lincoln Navigator with tinted windows had been idling for 10 minutes. The driver, a large man in a dark suit named Marcus, who had been my personal security detail for 5 years, stepped out and opened the rear door. "Good evening, Ms. Washington." Marcus said, his voice deep and respectful. "Good evening, Marcus," I said, sliding into the leather interior that smelled of vanilla and expensive conditioning cream. Julian was standing on the porch now in his socks. He stopped screaming. His mouth hung open. He watched as the poor girl he had just threatened entered a car that cost more than his entire net worth. "Take me to the airport," I told Marcus. "The private terminal." As the car pulled away, I watched Julian in the rearview mirror. He looked small. He looked confused. He looked like a man who had just realized that the trap he built was empty and the bait had been poisoned all along. But he had not seen anything yet. The $50,000 he wanted. That was a rounding error on the legal fees I was about to unleash on him. I pulled out my phone. I had one more call to make before I took off for D.C. I dialed the number. "It is time," I said when the voice on the other end answered. "Execute the lien on his business accounts. Freeze everything." I hung up and leaned back, watching the lights of the subdivision fade away. The mouse was gone. The hunt had begun. The following evening, I walked into the grand ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel. I was not there to celebrate. I was there to investigate. After leaving Julian on the porch, I had spent the night at a hotel, instructing my team to hold off on freezing the assets for exactly 24 hours. I needed to know one thing. I needed to know if Julian was acting alone or if the entire Washington clan was complicit in the destruction of my life. Tonight was my mother-in-law Patricia's 60th birthday party. It was a black tie affair funded entirely by credit cards and loans that Julian had likely taken out in my name. The room was filled with Atlanta's social climbers people who wore rented tuxedos and fake smiles, desperate to be seen. I wore a simple black dress. To them it looked plain. They did not know it was a vintage piece from a designer who did not sell to the public, worth more than the car Brad drove. I walked in alone. The moment I crossed the threshold, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Patricia was holding court near the champagne tower. She wore a sequined gown that was too tight and too bright. When she saw me, her smile faltered, then twisted into a grimace of distaste. She did not hug me. She did not say hello. She turned her back to me and continued talking to a woman I recognized as the wife of a local pastor. I took a glass of sparkling water from a passing waiter and moved to the edge of the room. I was the ghost at the feast, the unwanted guest. I watched Julian across the room. He was laughing loudly, holding court with a group of investors. He looked confident. He thought he had won. He thought my appearance tonight meant I had capitulated, that I was ready to sign his fraudulent loans. He caught my eye and winked, a cold, possessive wink. It made my skin crawl. But the real show began when Brad, my brother-in-law, found the open bar. Brad was a man who became louder and crueler with every sip of scotch. He was standing with Julian's sister Tasha and a group of their friends from the country club. I tried to walk past them to get to the powder room, but Brad stepped in front of me, blocking my path. He smelled of expensive cologne and cheap liquor. "Well, look who decided to show up." Brad announced, his voice booming over the soft jazz music. "The princess of poverty herself." The group laughed. Tasha swirled her wine and looked me up and down with open disdain. "We were taking bets on whether you would have the nerve to come, Jasmine." Tasha said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Mom was worried you would show up in your work clothes. You know, since you worked so hard entering all that data." I stood my ground. I did not shrink. I did not look down. "I am here for Patricia," I said calmly. "For Patricia?" Brad scoffed. "Please. You are here because you are hungry. Look at you. You are probably hoping to take some leftovers home in a Tupperware container." The cruelty was standard for them. But tonight, there was an edge to it, a sharpness that suggested they were hiding something. "You know, guys," Brad continued, turning to his audience, "Julian is a saint. A literal saint. Do you know he had to sell his Porsche last week, his beloved 911, and do you know why he pointed a finger at me? Because of her. Because she racked up so much credit card debt buying useless junk that he had to bail her out. He sold his dream car to pay for her mistakes, and she does not even say thank you. I felt the blood rush to my ears. It was a lie, a magnificent, bold-faced lie. Julian had sold the Porsche because he lost $50,000 on a bad crypto bet. I had seen the bank statements, but he had spun a narrative where I was the villain, the financial drain, the anchor dragging him down. "Is that true?" one of the women asked, looking at me with disgust. "You made him sell his car." I opened my mouth to speak to defend myself, but Tasha cut me off. "Of course it is true. Julian creates wealth. Jasmine consumes it. That is just how it is. Some people are builders and some people are leeches." I gripped my clutch so hard my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull out my phone and show them my bank balance. I wanted to buy this hotel right now and kick them all out. But I waited. I needed the final piece of the puzzle. Brad took a step closer, invading my personal space. He leaned in, his voice dropping just low enough so the rest of the room would not hear, but loud enough for the group to catch every word. "Honestly, Jasmine, I do not know why he keeps you around. Charity work, maybe?" He laughed at his own joke. "I mean, we all told him. We all said, 'Julian, why are you settling for the help? Why are you scraping the bottom of the barrel?' Then he delivered the blow that shattered whatever hesitation I had left. He could have had Chloe," Brad said, grinning maliciously. The name hung in the air between us. Chloe. My heart stopped. Tasha giggled. "Oh, God. Chloe. Now that is a woman. She is everything you are not." Brad continued, seemingly enjoying the look of shock on my face. "She is beautiful. She is sophisticated. And her father is Senator Kensington. Do you know what kind of doors that opens?" Brad took a sip of his drink, his eyes gleaming. "Julian should be in D.C. right now attending galas at the White House. Instead, he is stuck here in Atlanta babysitting you. It is a tragedy, really." He sighed, shaking his head. "Why didn't he marry her?" Brad, Tasha asked, playing along with the cruel game. Brad looked at me, his eyes dead and cold. "Because he felt sorry for you, Jasmine. He told us. He said you were so pathetic, so alone in the world, that if he left you, you would probably starve. So he kept you, like a stray dog. But let us be real," he added, whispering now. "We all know where his heart is. We all know who the real Mrs. Washington should be. And honestly, it is only a matter of time." I felt the room spin. They knew. They all knew. It wasn't just a secret affair. It wasn't just Julian living a double life. It was a family joke. They had all met Chloe. They had probably had dinner with her. They discussed her like she was the rightful queen, and I was the usurper, the placeholder, the charity case. Brad had just confirmed that every smile they had given me over the last 2 years was fake. Every birthday card, every holiday dinner, every moment of family was a performance. Behind my back, they were laughing. They were waiting for Julian to discard me so they could welcome the senator's daughter. I looked at Tasha. She was smirking. I looked at Patricia across the room. She was watching us, and when our eyes met, she didn't look away. She gave a small, imperceptible nod. She sanctioned this. She approved of this humiliation. I felt a strange sensation wash over me. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't shame. It was clarity. Crystal clear, icy cold clarity. I had come here looking for a reason to show mercy. I had come here hoping that perhaps Julian's family were victims of his lies too. But they were not victims. They were accomplices. Brad was still talking, but his voice sounded distant like a buzzing fly. "You should go, Jasmine," he said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. "You are embarrassing yourself. Go home and heat up a frozen dinner. Leave the adults to handle business." I looked at Brad. I looked at his cheap rented tuxedo. I looked at Tasha's fake diamonds. I took a deep breath. I smoothed the front of my dress. "You are right, Brad," I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. "I should go." Brad laughed. "Finally, she gets it." I turned to walk away, but I stopped and looked back at him over my shoulder. "By the way, Brad, I heard you were looking for a job on Wall Street. You sent an application to Artemis Holdings this morning, didn't you?" Brad froze. His drink paused halfway to his mouth. "How do you know that?" I smiled. It was the first real smile I had worn all night. It was a smile that promised violence. Because I read every resume that crosses my desk. I didn't wait for his reaction. I walked away. I walked through the crowd of people who thought I was nothing. I walked past Julian, who was too busy charming a waitress to notice me leaving. I walked out of the ballroom and into the cool night air. I pulled out my phone. "Execute the order," I said into the receiver. "But wait," my lawyer said. "You wanted to wait 24 hours. I looked back at the hotel glowing in the night. "Plans have changed," I said. "Torch it all. Start with Brad's employment file, then move to the house. I want the eviction notice posted on the door before the cake is cut." I hung up. The humiliation was over. The execution had begun. I left the St. Regis Hotel with the sound of Brad's laughter still ringing in my ears. I sat in the back of the Lincoln Navigator, my hands trembling not from fear, but from a cold, hard adrenaline. I had given the order to destroy them legally, but there was one loose end, one thing I could not leave behind when the marshals came to board up the house. My mother's jewelry. It was not expensive by billionaire standards. It was a simple gold locket and a string of pearls she had worn every Sunday to church before the cancer took her. It was the only physical thing I had left of the woman who taught me that dignity was not something you bought, but something you carried. I had locked it in the floor safe in the master closet, hidden behind a false panel. Julian knew about the safe, but he did not know the combination. Or at least I thought he didn't. "Turn the car around," I told Marcus. "Take me back to the house. I need 5 minutes." Marcus looked at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes concerned. "Ms. Washington is that wise. If the situation is volatile—" "Just drive, Marcus," I interrupted softly. "I am not going to fight them. I just need to get my box." We pulled into the driveway 20 minutes later. The house was blazing with light. Every window was illuminated, casting long, distorted shadows onto the lawn. Julian's BMW was parked haphazardly on the grass, the trunk open. I told Marcus to wait. I walked up the steps, my heels clicking on the stone. The front door was unlocked. Wide open, actually. I stepped inside. The foyer was a disaster zone. Papers were strewn everywhere. Drawers from the hallway console table had been pulled out and dumped on the floor. It looked like a robbery was in progress, and in a way it was. I heard voices coming from the master bedroom upstairs, shouting, the sound of things breaking. I climbed the stairs silently. The plush carpet swallowed the sound of my footsteps. As I got closer, I recognized the voices. It was Julian and his mother, Patricia. "I found it," Patricia screamed. I heard the distinct metallic clang of a heavy door hitting the wall. I stopped in the doorway of the bedroom. The room had been torn apart. The mattress was flipped over. The dresser drawers were emptied. And there inside the walk-in closet, Julian and Patricia were crouched in front of the open floor safe. Julian was holding a crowbar. He had pried the electronic lock off the hinges. He was sweating, his eyes wild and desperate. "What is in there?" Patricia demanded, grabbing at the contents. "Is there cash?" "Tell me there is cash, Julian. We need to pay the caterer for tonight or they are going to sue us." Julian reached in and pulled out a small blue bank book. It was a savings passbook from a local credit union. I had planted it there months ago as a test, a decoy. He flipped it open, his hands shaking. $2,000, he spat, throwing the book on the floor in disgust. 2,000 miserable dollars. That is it. That is her life savings. I stood in the shadows watching them, watching my husband and my mother-in-law desecrate my privacy for pocket change. "Check the back," Patricia yelled. "There has to be more. She must have hidden money from you. No one is that broke." Julian reached back into the safe. He pulled out a small velvet box. My breath hitched in my throat. He opened it. The gold locket and the pearls gleamed under the harsh closet light. "Gold," Julian muttered. "Real gold. And these pearls, they look vintage." Patricia snatched the box from his hands. She held the pearls up to her neck, looking at herself in the full-length mirror. "They are old," she sniffed, examining the clasp. "Probably from a pawn shop. But the gold is solid. We can melt it down. Or sell it to that jeweler in Buckhead. He does not ask questions. Sell it, Julian asked, looking at the locket. Mom, that is her mother's. She told me about that. It is the only thing she has left. Patricia turned on him, her face twisting into a mask of cruelty. So what do you want to lose the business? Do you want to go to jail for writing bad checks? We are taking it. Consider it reimbursement for the 2 years she lived here rent-free. She owes us this. Julian hesitated for a fraction of a second. He looked at the locket. He looked at his mother. Then he looked at the open safe, empty of the millions he had hoped to find. Fine, he said, his voice hard. Take it. We will pawn it in the morning. It should get us a few thousand, enough to keep the wolves at bay for another day. He stood up and kicked the blue bank book across the room. Useless, he muttered. She really was useless. I had seen enough. I stepped out of the shadows. Enjoy them, I said, my voice cutting through the noise like a razor blade. Julian and Patricia spun around. Julian dropped the crowbar. It landed with a heavy thud on the hardwood floor. Patricia clutched the jewelry box to her chest like a thief caught in the act. Jasmine. Julian stammered, his face draining of color. We were just looking for what? Julian, I asked, walking slowly into the room. My money? My dignity? Or were you just looking for one last thing to steal from me before you discard me? Patricia recovered first. She stepped forward, holding my mother's necklace hostage in her manicured hand. We are taking this, she declared, lifting her chin defiantly. You owe Julian. You have been a burden on this family since the day you walked in. This is fair compensation for the emotional distress you caused him tonight at the party. I looked at the locket. I wanted to snatch it back. I wanted to scream. But I realized something in that moment. If I took it back now, it was just an object. If I let them take it, it was a felony, grand larceny, burglary, theft of property valued over $5,000. I looked at Julian. I looked at the man I had once thought I would build a life with. He wasn't looking at me with love. He wasn't even looking at me with hate. He was looking at me with calculation, wondering if he could physically overpower me to get out of the room. You are right, Patricia, I said softly. I do owe you. I reached into my purse. They flinched, thinking I was pulling out a weapon. I pulled out the spare key to the house. I dropped it on the floor at their feet. I owe you the lesson of a lifetime. I turned around and walked out. Wait, Julian called out, confusion in his voice. You are just letting us take it. You are not going to fight for your mommy's little necklace? I didn't answer. I walked down the stairs. I walked past the overturned furniture. I walked out the front door and got back into the Lincoln. Drive, I told Marcus. As the car pulled away, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a specific vibration pattern, 3 long pulses. I pulled it out. The screen was black with only a single encrypted notification glowing in red text. Sender, Real Wealth, Private Bank, Zurich. Subject, Urgent Security Alert, Level 5. I unlocked the phone with my biometric ID. The message expanded. Ms. Washington, our cybersecurity team has detected a brute force penetration attempt on your primary trust fund account ending in 8800. Location, Atlanta, GA. Device MacBook Pro registered to Julian, Washington. The intruder is attempting to bypass the secondary firewall using your maiden name and social security number. Current balance at risk, $412,000 USD. Protocol dictates we freeze the assets immediately. However, seeing the localized nature of the attack, we await your command. Shall we activate the Scorched Earth Protocol immediately? This will permanently blacklist the intruder's IP, notify the FBI Cybercrimes Division, and freeze all assets associated with the intruder's identity globally. I read the message. I looked out the window at the passing streetlights. Julian was upstairs right now, probably trying to hack into what he thought was a small inheritance, not realizing he was knocking on the door of a fortress that held nearly $500 million. He was greedy. He was stupid. And he had just handed me the weapon to end him. I typed my reply slowly, savoring every letter. Not yet. Let him think he won. Let him think he cracked the code. Let him see the balance. I want him to see the number 400 million. I want him to believe for exactly 1 minute that he is rich. And then, execute. I hit send. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. The theft of the necklace hurt, but the theft of his future, that was going to feel amazing. The blue lights flashing against the living room curtains were the first sign that the game had changed. I was standing in the foyer, my suitcase packed, waiting for Marcus to bring the car around the back. I had intended to leave quietly to let the lawyers handle the demolition of Julian's life from a safe distance. But Julian, it seemed, had one final desperate card to play. A heavy fist pounded on the front door. It was not a polite knock. It was the authoritative, demanding hammer of law enforcement. Jasmine Washington. Open the door. This is the Atlanta Police Department. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at the door, confused. I had not called the police. Had Julian? Was he trying to report me for stealing my own car? It seemed petty, even for him. I unlocked the door and swung it open. I was not prepared for the scene on my front porch. 2 uniformed police officers stood there, hands resting near their holsters. Behind them stood Julian, looking disheveled and teary-eyed, a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Next to him was Brad, holding a thick manila folder and looking solemn. And beside them was a man I had never seen before in my life. A tall, balding man in a white lab coat with a stethoscope around his neck. Mrs. Washington, the older officer asked, stepping into my personal space. Yes, I said, stepping back. What is going on, ma'am? We received a call regarding a mental health emergency at this address, the officer said, his eyes scanning the room behind me. Your husband informs us that you are having an episode, that you are a danger to yourself and others. I stared at him. Then I looked at Julian. He was wiping a fake tear from his cheek. Baby, please, Julian choked out, his voice trembling. Just go with them. Do it for me. I cannot watch you hurt yourself anymore. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice rising. I am not hurting myself. I am leaving you. There is a difference. See? Brad interjected, stepping forward and pointing at me. See how aggressive she is. This is exactly what Dr. Thorne warned us about. The paranoia, the delusions of grandeur. She thinks she is running away. She thinks she has millions of dollars. The stranger in the white coat stepped forward. He looked at me with cold, dead eyes. Mrs. Washington, I am Dr. Lawrence Thorne. I have been consulting with your husband regarding your condition. My condition? I laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. I have never met you. You are not my doctor. Dr. Thorne sighed, opening a clipboard. Classic denial. It is a hallmark of paranoid schizophrenia, officer. She disassociates from reality. She forgets her medical history. Mr. Washington has provided me with her journals. She writes about imaginary businesses. She owns imaginary bank accounts. She believes she is a billionaire. It is a coping mechanism for her traumatic childhood, but it has spiraled into psychosis. He held up a piece of paper. It looked official. It had a judge's stamp on it. This is an emergency order for involuntary commitment, Dr. Thorne said smoothly. Signed by Judge Miller about an hour ago. We are here to transport you to the Whispering Pines Psychiatric Facility for a 72-hour evaluation. I felt the blood drain from my face. Whispering Pines. That wasn't a hospital. It was a holding tank for the indigent and the forgotten, a place where people disappeared into the system. And Judge Miller. That was Brad's golf buddy. You forged this, I said, pointing at the paper. You forged my medical records. This is a setup. Officer! She is hallucinating, Julian cried out, grabbing the officer's arm. She stopped taking her meds 3 weeks ago. She told me she bought the apartment complex down the street. She told me she was funding a Senate campaign. It is getting worse. She threatened to burn the house down tonight. He was using my own words against me. He was twisting the truth just enough to make it sound insane. To a stranger, to these cops who didn't know me, a woman in a data entry job claiming to own a $40 million company did sound crazy. It sounded impossible. I am not hallucinating, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, knowing that screaming would only validate their lies. Officer, check my ID. Check my bank records. This man is a con artist. He is trying to get power of attorney over me to steal my assets. The officer looked at me with pity. Ma'am, your husband showed us the foreclosure notice. We know you are under a lot of financial stress. Stress can trigger a break. We are just here to help you. They didn't believe me. To them, I was just a stressed-out black woman who had cracked under the pressure of poverty. Julian had painted the picture perfectly. "We need you to come with us, Mrs. Washington," the second officer said, unclipping a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "We do not want to use force, but we have a court order." I looked at the handcuffs. I looked at Brad, who was struggling to hide a smirk. "This is what this is about, isn't it?" I said, locking eyes with Julian. "You want a conservatorship. You want to declare me incompetent so you can sign the loan documents yourself. You want to become my legal guardian so you can access the trust fund you found out about." Julian looked down, shaking his head sadly. "I just want my wife back, officer. Please, just take her to the hospital before she hurts someone." The officer stepped forward and grabbed my wrist. The metal was cold against my skin. "Turn around, ma'am." I did not resist. I knew the law. If I fought a police officer, I would be charged with assault. Then I would be in the criminal system, and Julian would win. I had to stay clean. I had to play the long game. I turned around. I felt the handcuffs click shut. The sound was final. It was the sound of my freedom being stripped away by the two men I had trusted most in the world. As they walked me out of the house, my neighbors were watching from their windows. I saw Mrs. Higgins across the street shaking her head. Julian had won the narrative. To the world, I was the crazy wife being taken away for her own good. Brad walked beside the gurney they had, waiting at the bottom of the steps, leaning in close so only I could hear. "Do not worry, Jasmine," he whispered. "We will take good care of the house. And once Dr. Thorne declares you permanently incompetent, Julian will make sure your money is managed properly. We are going to have a lot of fun investing that inheritance." I looked at him. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. "You better kill me, Brad," I whispered back, "because if I ever walk out of that hospital, I'm going to bury you." Brad laughed. "You are not walking out, sweetie. Dr. Thorne is very thorough. You are going to be in there for a very, very long time." They pushed me into the back of the ambulance. The doors slammed shut, cutting off the view of my home, my car and my husband standing on the porch, finally looking happy. Inside the ambulance, Dr. Thorne sat across from me, filling out paperwork. He didn't check my vitals. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He was just ensuring the paper trail was airtight. "You know this is kidnapping, right?" I asked him. He didn't look up. "It is a medical intervention, Mrs. Washington. And frankly, with the fee your husband is paying me, I really do not care what you call it. Just sit back and relax. I am going to give you a sedative to help with the agitation." He pulled a syringe from his bag. I shrank back against the wall of the ambulance. "I am not agitated," I shouted. "Do not touch me!" The officer in the front banged on the partition. "Keep it down back there." Dr. Thorne smiled a thin, cruel smile. "See agitation. Resistance to treatment. It is all going in the report." He moved toward me with the needle. I realized then that this was not a legal battle anymore. This was a fight for my life. If he drugged me, if he messed with my mind, I might actually lose. I might end up drooling in a corner while Julian spent my millions. I closed my eyes and focused on one thing, one single thought, the phone call I had made to Zurich. Julian thought he had won. He thought he had neutralized the threat. But he didn't know that the machine was already in motion. He didn't know that by having me committed, he had just triggered the dead man's switch clause in my trust. If I was incapacitated, control didn't go to my next of kin. It went to the board of directors of Artemis Holdings. And the chairman of the board was a woman named Jessica Adabio, a woman who had been my mentor since I was 22 and who hated Julian Washington more than I did. The needle pricked my arm. The world started to blur. As the darkness took me, I smiled. Julian had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He thought he was locking me up. In reality, he had just invited the sharks to dinner. The needle was inches from my arm. Dr. Thorne's eyes were gleaming with the anticipation of silencing me, of turning the inconvenient wife into a sedated patient. The ambulance was stationary, the engine humming beneath us, parked just outside my driveway, while the officers finalized their paperwork outside. I had seconds. I knew that once that sedative entered my bloodstream, my credibility would vanish. Anything I said afterward would be dismissed as the ramblings of a drugged woman. I needed to stop time. I needed to play the card I had kept hidden in my bra, the one card even Julian didn't know existed. "Wait!" I said, my voice sharp and commanding, cutting through the sterile air of the ambulance. Dr. Thorne paused, annoyed. "Mrs. Washington, please. The more you resist, the harder this will be." "I am not resisting," I said, staring him down. "I am informing you that you are about to make a career-ending mistake. Before you stick that needle in me, you need to check the inside pocket of my jacket." Dr. Thorne laughed. "What is in there?" "A weapon. Another imaginary bank book." "No," I said. "A business card. Black and gold. Embossed." He rolled his eyes and looked at the officer standing by the open doors. "Check it just so she shuts up." The officer, a younger man who looked uncomfortable with the whole situation, leaned in and reached into my blazer pocket. He pulled out a heavy matte black card with gold lettering. He squinted at it in the dim light of the ambulance bay. Then he stopped. His posture stiffened. He looked at the card, then at me, then back at the card. "Holy," he muttered under his breath. "What is it?" Dr. Thorne asked, impatient. "Doctor, put the needle away," the officer said, his voice trembling slightly. "Excuse me," Dr. Thorne snapped. "I have a court order. And she has the private number of Governor Eleanor Vance," the officer said, holding the card up like it was a holy relic. "This isn't a standard card. It has the state seal and a handwritten note on the back." Dr. Thorne froze. "Read the note," I commanded, my voice gaining strength. "Read it out loud so the doctor can hear." The officer turned the card over. To Jasmine. "Thank you for saving my campaign. Call me anytime, day or night. Eleanor." The silence in the ambulance was absolute. Governor Vance wasn't just a politician. She was the most powerful woman in the state, a woman known for her ruthlessness against corruption. And 2 years ago, when her campaign was drowning in debt, an anonymous donor had wired $5 million to keep her afloat. That donor was Artemis Holdings. That donor was me. I looked at Dr. Thorne. He was slowly capping the needle, his face pale. "You have 2 choices, Doctor," I said, sitting up straighter. "You can administer that drug, in which case I will have the governor on the line within 5 minutes of waking up, and you will lose your license, your practice, and your freedom. Or you can unbuckle these straps, apologize, and get out of my sight." Dr. Thorne looked at the officer. The officer stepped back, raising his hands. "I am not getting involved in this, Doc. If she knows Vance, this is way above my pay grade." "I am calling the chief." The chief arrived 3 minutes later. He took one look at the card, one look at me, and unlocked the handcuffs himself. "Mrs. Washington," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead, "there seems to have been a terrible misunderstanding. Your husband," he was very convincing. "My husband is a con artist, Chief," I said, rubbing my wrists. "And Dr. Thorne here was about to act as his accomplice. I suggest you take statements from them. Thorough ones." I stepped out of the ambulance. The night air had never felt so sweet. I saw Julian and Brad standing by the porch. They were smiling, waiting for the ambulance to drive away with their problem. When they saw me step out free and unmedicated, flanked by the police chief, their smiles vanished. Julian dropped his phone. I didn't even look at him. I didn't say a word. I walked past them, past the house I had bought, past the life I was leaving behind. "Where are you going?" Julian shouted, his voice cracking with panic. "Jasmine, you cannot just leave," I signaled to Marcus, who had pulled the Lincoln Navigator up to the curb. "I'm going to fix the mess you made, Julian," I whispered to myself. I got into the car. "Airport," I told Marcus. "Teterboro to Dulles. File a flight plan for D.C. immediately." "Why D.C.?" Marcus asked, merging onto the highway. "Because," I said, looking at the city lights fading behind me, "that is where the other wife is. And if I know Julian, he is not just stealing from me. He is stealing from her too." The flight to Washington, D.C. took 90 minutes. I spent the entire time on the encrypted Wi-Fi digging into the finances of Senator Kensington Chloe's father. What I found made my stomach turn. Julian hadn't just married Chloe for prestige. He was using the senator's name to guarantee loans for a massive real estate development that didn't exist. It was a Ponzi scheme, pure and simple. He was paying old investors with new money, and the well was running dry. That was why he needed my $50,000. That was why he needed to sell my jewelry. The house of cards was collapsing. I landed at midnight. I didn't go to a hotel. I went straight to the address I had found on Julian's travel logs, a luxury brownstone in Georgetown. I stood outside the door. I could see a light on in the upstairs window. I took a deep breath. This was the woman who had called me at 2 a.m. This was the woman who had called my husband hers. I should have hated her. I should have wanted to destroy her. But looking at the financial wreckage on my iPad, I didn't feel hate. I felt a grim sense of solidarity. We were both victims of the same predator. I rang the doorbell. A minute later, the intercom buzzed. "Who is it?" It was the same voice. "Chloe." "It is Jasmine," I said. "Open the door, Chloe. We need to talk about Julian." There was a long pause, then the buzz of the lock releasing. I walked up the stairs to the second floor. Chloe was standing in the doorway. She looked nothing like the confident woman who had threatened me on the phone. She was wearing a silk robe, her blonde hair messy, her eyes red and puffy. She looked exhausted, and she looked terrified. She held a glass of wine in one hand, but her hand was shaking so badly the liquid was rippling. "You have a lot of nerve coming here," she spat, but there was no heat in it. Just fear. "Did he send you? Did he send you to tell me it is over?" I walked past her into the living room. It was beautiful, filled with expensive art and modern furniture, but it felt cold, staged, just like my house in Atlanta. "He didn't send me," I said, putting my purse down on the coffee table. "He tried to have me committed to a mental institution tonight so he could steal my inheritance." Chloe froze. She closed the door and turned to face me. What? He is desperate." "Chloe," I said, turning to face her. "He is out of money. The Porsche is gone. The cash is gone. He is drowning. And I think you know it." Chloe slumped onto the sofa. She put the wine glass down on a coaster, staring at it. "He told me he was a billionaire," she whispered. "He told me he was a developer. He said he needed access to my father's donor list for a charity gala." I nodded. "And did you give him the list?" Chloe nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I did. I thought he was helping my dad. But then, people started calling. Angry people. Investors. They said they gave money to Julian Washington for the Kensington project, and now they cannot reach him." She looked up at me, her eyes wide with panic. "My father does not know Jasmine. If he finds out that his son-in-law is running a scam using his name, it will destroy his career. The election is in 3 months. This will end him." She buried her face in her hands. I walked over and sat on the ottoman in front of her. I looked closely at her. I saw the way her hand rested protectively on her stomach, a gesture I recognized from my friends who were mothers. "You are pregnant, aren't you?" I asked softly. Chloe stiffened. She looked at me, fear in her eyes. "How did you—" "I guess," I said. "And the fact that you are drinking non-alcoholic wine. I saw the label in the kitchen." She broke down then, a guttural, heartbreaking sob. "I am 3 months along," she cried. "I was going to tell him this weekend. I thought we were building a family. But it is all a lie, isn't it? The trips to Atlanta, the business meetings. He has been with you the whole time. He has been playing us both, Chloe," I said firmly. "He needed my money to start the scam, and he needed your name to keep it going. He is a parasite." Chloe wiped her face, smearing mascara across her cheeks. "I have to fix this," she said, her voice frantic. "I have to pay them back. The investors. If I can just find $2 million, I can pay off the angry ones before they go to the press. I can cover it up." She looked at me, pleading. "Do you have money? You said on the phone you were just a data entry clerk, but you are here. You are wearing a blazer that costs more than my car. Who are you, Jasmine?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the streets of D.C., the seat of power. "I am the person who is going to save you," I said. "But not by paying them off." I turned back to her. "If you pay them off, Chloe, he wins. He will just do it again. He will drain you, then he will drain your father, and then he will leave you and that baby with nothing. You cannot cover up a Ponzi scheme. It always collapses. The only question is, are you going to be under the rubble when it falls?" Chloe looked at me, trembling. So what do we do? If I tell my dad Julian goes to jail, but the scandal, the press, it will still ruin us. Not if we control the narrative, I said. Not if we are the ones who turn him in. I walked back to the table and opened my iPad. I pulled up the file I had prepared on the plane. I have the records, Chloe. I have the wire transfers from your father's campaign fund to Julian's personal offshore accounts. I have the proof that he forged documents. I tapped the screen. I have enough money to buy this entire city block, Chloe. I can make the financial loss disappear for the investors. I can buy their silence and their debt. I can protect your father's reputation. Chloe stared at me, hope flickering in her eyes. You would do that? Why, you hate me. I am the other woman. I looked at her. I saw a scared girl who had been manipulated by a master narcissist. I saw a mother fighting for her unborn child. I do not hate you, Chloe, I said. I hate him, and I hate what he does to women like us. He thinks we are weak. He thinks because you are a daddy's girl and I am an orphan that we are easy targets. I reached into my purse and pulled out a handkerchief. I handed it to her. She took it, wiping her eyes. So here is the deal, I continued, my voice hardening. I will use my capital to shield your father and reimburse the victims, but in exchange I need you to do something for me. What? Chloe asked, sitting up straighter. Anything. I need his political cover blown. I need you to give me the login to your father's donor database. I need to trace every single person Julian contacted, and then I need you to stand next to me when the FBI walks into his office. Chloe hesitated. The FBI. He is my husband, Jasmine. He is the father of my child. I leaned in close. He is not a father, Chloe. He is a liability. Do you want your child visiting him in a federal prison for 20 years? Or do you want to cut the cancer out now and start over? I waited. The silence stretched between us. I could see the battle in her eyes, the love she thought she had versus the reality she was facing. Finally, she took a deep breath. She placed her hand on her stomach. She looked at me, and the fear was replaced by a cold resolve. He used my dad's name, she whispered. He stole from my family. She looked up, her blue eyes icy. He calls me every night at 10, she said. He thinks I'm stupid. He tells me he loves me. She reached for her phone on the table. He is going to call in 5 minutes. I smiled, a dangerous, predatory smile. Put it on speaker, I said. Chloe nodded. She picked up the phone. You asked me if I wanted to cry or get even, she said, her voice steady now. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw the senator's daughter in her. I saw the steel. Let us bury him. I sat down next to her on the sofa. 2 women, one black, one white, from different worlds united by a common enemy. The phone rang. The caller ID flashed. My husband. Chloe looked at me. I nodded. She answered. Hey, baby. Julian's voice filled the room, smooth and lying. I miss you. DC must be lonely without me. Chloe winked at me. Actually, Julian, she said, her voice sweet as poison. I am not lonely at all. I have a friend here. A friend, Julian asked, sounding suspicious. Who? Chloe looked at me. I leaned toward the phone. Hi, Julian, I said. The silence on the other end was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It is Jasmine, he stammered. How? Why? We are comparing notes, Julian, I said. And guess what? Your math does not add up. Chloe leaned in. And Julian, she added, do not bother coming home. We changed the locks. We hung up together. Then we got to work. We had a timeline to build, a paper trail to secure, and a husband to destroy. The unexpected ally had just become his worst nightmare. It had been 48 hours since I boarded the plane to DC, 48 hours since Julian thought he had successfully disposed of me in a state-run psychiatric facility. In his mind, I was currently sedated, wearing a paper gown and drooling into a pillow while he liquidated my life. He was so confident in his victory that he decided to accelerate his exit plan. The venue was the ballroom of the Grand Millennium Hotel in downtown Atlanta. It was a space that screamed new money, Crystal chandeliers that were just a little too large, gold leaf on the pillars that was starting to peel if you looked closely, and a carpet that smelled faintly of industrial cleaner masked by expensive lilies. Julian called it the gala for the future. I called it the going-away party. I stood outside the double mahogany doors, listening to the muffled sound of applause. My team had been tracking Julian's movements in real time. We knew exactly what this event was. It was a desperate final cash grab. He was pitching a development project called the Kensington Estates. He was using Chloe's family name to sell non-existent luxury condos to Atlanta's elite. He was asking for a $50,000 deposit from each investor. Cash or immediate wire transfer only. Tonight only. And in his jacket pocket, tucked behind a silk handkerchief, was a one-way ticket to Cabo San Lucas and a boarding pass for a woman named Vanessa, a 22-year-old bottle service waitress he had met 3 weeks ago. She was the third branch of his treacherous tree, the escape hatch he planned to use once he had milked Chloe and me dry. He wasn't planning on building condos. He was planning on disappearing by sunrise. I adjusted the strap of my dress. For 2 years, Julian and his family had only seen me in clearance rack cardigans and sensible slacks. They had mocked my appearance. They had called me frumpy. They had told me I embarrassed them. Tonight, I was not wearing sensible slacks. I was wearing a custom-made Balmain gown, structured and sharp, the color of deep, dangerous onyx. It was encrusted with 3,000 tiny black crystals that caught the light like armor. It had cost $20,000, and I had paid for it with the dividend check from just one of my smaller subsidiary companies. My hair was pulled back in a sleek architectural bun, and around my neck sat a diamond choker that was worth more than the entire venue we were standing in. I nodded to the security guard. He was one of mine, a private contractor I had placed at the door an hour ago, replacing the hotel staff. "Open it," I said. The heavy doors swung open. The room was filled with about 200 people. The air was thick with the smell of roasted lamb and greed. On the stage, Julian was holding a microphone, beaming. He looked manic. There was a sheen of sweat on his upper lip that the stage lights were catching. And this project, he was saying, his voice booming, is not just a building. It is a legacy. It is the culmination of years of hard work. And I am so proud to have my family here with me to share this moment. He gestured to the front table. Patricia was there wearing a dress she had likely charged to my credit card before I froze it. Brad was there pouring champagne, looking smug. Tasha was taking selfies. They looked like royalty. They looked untouchable. Then the sound of my heels hit the marble floor of the entryway. Click, click, click. The sound cut through the room. It was a distinct, sharp rhythm that commanded attention. Heads started to turn. First the people in the back rows, then the middle. The murmuring started, a ripple of confusion that spread like a wave toward the stage. Julian was still talking. "We have secured the land. We have the permits. All we need is your partnership to—" He stopped. He saw the audience looking away from him. He followed their gaze to the back of the room. The microphone dropped from his hand. It hit the floor with a deafening screech of feedback that made everyone wince. Julian stared at me. His face went from flushed to ghostly white in a heartbeat. He blinked once, twice, as if trying to clear a hallucination. He thought I was locked up. He thought I was gone. Seeing me standing there looking like a dark goddess of vengeance must have felt like seeing a ghost. I didn't stop. I walked down the center aisle. The crowd parted for me. These were people who had ignored me at parties for years. Now they were staring at me with a mixture of awe and confusion. They didn't recognize the woman in the Balmain gown. They couldn't reconcile this vision of power with the quiet wife they had pitied. Brad was the first to react. He jumped up from his seat, knocking his chair over. He rushed to intercept me before I could reach the stage. He looked panicked, his eyes darting around the room to see if anyone important noticed the disruption. "Jasmine," he hissed, stepping in front of me, blocking my path. "What the hell are you doing here? You are supposed to be away." I stopped. I looked at him. I looked at his cheap tie and his panicked sweat. "Plans changed, Brad," I said, my voice cool and projected just enough for the people at the nearby tables to hear. He grabbed my arm, trying to pull me toward the side exit. "You need to leave," he whispered aggressively. "You are making a scene. Julian is in the middle of a presentation. You are obviously having an episode. Did you escape from the hospital? Do I need to call the police again?" I looked down at his hand on my arm. "Remove your hand, Brad," I said, "or I will have you removed from the building." Brad laughed, a nervous, incredulous sound. "You will have me removed. This is a private event, Jasmine. You are trespassing. And look at you." He stepped back and looked me up and down, sneering. "What is this costume? Where did you get that dress? Did you steal it?" He raised his voice so the table of investors next to us could hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize," he announced, smiling tightly at the room. "My sister-in-law is a bit unwell. She has a history of kleptomania. We are handling it." He turned back to me, his eyes nasty. "Seriously, Jasmine, who did you steal that from, or did you find a way to maximize the limit on Julian's emergency credit card before we cut you off? You look ridiculous. You are playing dress-up." The room went silent. Everyone was watching, waiting to see the crazy wife break down, waiting for the security guards to drag me out. I smiled. It was slow and terrifying. "I did not steal it, Brad," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I bought it." Brad scoffed. "With what money?" "Your data entry money. That dress costs more than your car." I took a step closer to him. "I bought it with the interest, Brad." He frowned. "Interest? What interest?" "The interest on the loan you just defaulted on," I said. Brad's face went slack. He didn't understand. He couldn't process it. But Julian, standing on the stage, was starting to put the pieces together. I saw him scramble off the stage. He didn't run to me. He ran to his mother. He whispered something in her ear, and Patricia's head snapped toward me, her eyes wide with horror. "Brad!" I continued, brushing invisible dust off my shoulder. "I suggest you sit down. You are going to want to be seated for the next part of the presentation." I sidestepped him. I didn't run to the stage. I walked to the front table, the table reserved for the VIPs. I pulled out the empty chair next to Patricia, the chair that was meant for the mystery investor Julian had been bragging about all night. Patricia shrank away from me as I sat down. She clutched her purse, the one that probably contained my mother's stolen necklace. "Jasmine," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What are you doing? Julian has security. He will throw you out." I poured myself a glass of water from the crystal pitcher on the table. "Julian does not have security, Patricia," I said, taking a sip. "Julian has bills. And unfortunately for him, he stopped paying the security company 3 months ago." I gestured to the guards standing at the perimeter of the room. They weren't looking at Julian. They were looking at me. They nodded. "They work for me now," I said. Patricia looked at the guards. She looked at me. The realization began to dawn on her. The fear. Julian rushed over to the table. He was panting. He looked at the guests who were whispering. Then he looked at me with a mixture of fury and terror. "What did you do?" he hissed, leaning over the table. "How did you get out? I had a court order." I looked up at him. I saw the ticket to Mexico peeking out of his pocket. "You had a piece of paper, Julian," I said. "I have the governor." Julian flinched. "The governor, you are lying. You are crazy." "Am I?" I asked. I reached into my clutch. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out a simple leather-bound ledger. A copy of the Kensington Estates financial projections he had been showing on the screen, but mine had red ink all over it. "You are raising money for a condo complex on 4th Street, right?" I asked loudly. Julian looked around, panic rising. "Jasmine, keep your voice down. We can talk about this at home." "There is no home, Julian," I said. "But about this project, it is funny. Because I own the land on 4th Street." The investor at the next table, a man named Mr. Henderson, turned around. "Excuse me?" Mr. Henderson asked. "Did you say you own the land?" Julian waved his hands. No, she is delusional. She is my wife. She is off her medication." "Ignore her." I turned to Mr. Henderson. I smiled the smile of a CEO closing a deal. "Hello, Mr. Henderson. I believe you wired $50,000 to the Washington Development Group 10 minutes ago." Mr. Henderson nodded slowly. "Yes. You might want to call your bank," I said, "because the Washington Development Group doesn't own the land. They do not have a permit, and the account you wired that money to." It is a personal checking account linked to a debit card that is currently in a cab on its way to the airport with a woman named Vanessa. The room exploded. Julian lunged for me. He lost all control. He reached across the table to grab the ledger, to grab me, to silence the truth that was pouring out of my mouth. "You shut up," he screamed. "You jealous, useless bitch. You are ruining everything." But before his hand could touch me, a heavy hand landed on his shoulder. It wasn't Marcus. It was Chloe. She had stepped out from the curtains behind the stage. She wasn't wearing a ball gown. She was wearing a tailored suit, looking every inch the senator's daughter. She looked at Julian with eyes that were dry and cold. "Hello, husband," Chloe said. Julian froze. He looked at me. He looked at Chloe. He looked at the exit. The trap had snapped shut. The mouse was caught, and the cats were just getting started. The ballroom was frozen. It was a tableau of greed and terror suspended in time. Julian stood near the VIP table, his hand outstretched as if to strike me, but frozen by the sudden appearance of Chloe. The investors were murmuring a low buzz of confusion that was rapidly turning into suspicion. And I, Jasmine Washington, the woman they had all dismissed as a tax write-off, stood at the epicenter of the storm. I didn't wait for Julian to recover from the shock of seeing his secret wife. I didn't wait for the crowd to process the drama. I moved. I walked past Julian. I walked past his mother, who was clutching her stolen pearls so tightly I thought the string might snap. I walked up the 3 steps to the stage. The sound of my heels on the wood was the only sound in the room. Julian snapped out of his paralysis. He realized where I was going. I was going for the microphone. I was going for the pulpit he had used to preach his lies, security. Julian screamed, his voice cracking high and desperate. "Get her off the stage, she is trespassing. Remove her immediately." He pointed at the large men in black suits standing at the exits. He pointed at the men he thought were protecting him, but nobody moved. The guards stood like statues, their arms crossed, their eyes fixed on me with respect. They didn't work for the Washington Development Group anymore. They worked for Artemis Holdings. They worked for the check that had cleared in their accounts 10 minutes ago. Julian looked at them bewildered. He waved his arms frantically. "Are you deaf?" I said. "Get her out of here. She is crazy. She is dangerous." I reached the podium. I picked up the microphone Julian had dropped. It was heavy, cold, and powerful. I tapped it once. Thump. The sound echoed through the speakers, silencing the whispers in the back of the room. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the skepticism. I saw the judgment. They were still looking at me like I was the villain, the hysterical wife ruining a business gala. I needed to change the visual. I needed to show them exactly who Julian Washington was. I pulled a small remote control from the pocket of my blazer. It was linked to the presentation laptop backstage, which my team had hacked into 20 minutes prior. Julian was rushing toward the stage now, scrambling up the stairs. "Stop her!" he yelled at Brad. "Brad, do something! Cut the power!" Brad was fumbling under the table, looking for a cord, looking for a switch, looking for anything to save the illusion. It was too late. I pressed the button. Behind me, the massive LED screen that had been displaying the rendering of the fake luxury condos flickered. The image of the glass towers vanished. In its place, a high-definition video began to play. The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the ballroom. The video was clear. It was sunny. It was unmistakably Las Vegas, the little white wedding chapel. And there, standing at the altar, looking younger and carefree, was Julian. He was wearing a white linen suit. He was holding hands with a woman in a short white dress. The camera zoomed in as they signed the document on the table. The marriage license. The audio boomed through the speakers. "I, Julian Washington, take thee, Chloe Kensington, to be my lawfully wedded wife." The Julian on the screen kissed the bride. The Julian in the room froze halfway up the stairs. He looked up at the giant image of his own betrayal. His face went slack. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I watched the crowd. I saw the wives cover their mouths. I saw the husbands frown. Bigamy was not just a sin in their world. It was messy. It was a legal nightmare. But I wasn't done. I pressed the button again. The image changed. It was a split screen now. On the left was the marriage license from Nevada dated 6 months ago. On the right was the marriage license from Georgia dated 2 years ago. My marriage license. Both signed by Julian Washington. Both valid, both active. I leaned into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice calm and commanding, "you came here tonight to invest in a partnership. But I think you should know that Mr. Washington has a problem with partnerships. He seems to have too many of them." Julian turned to the crowd, his hands shaking. "It is a deep fake," he screamed, pointing at the screen. "It is AI. She generated it. She is trying to frame me. I never went to Vegas. I do not know that woman." He was denying the existence of the woman standing 10 feet away from him. He was gaslighting 200 people at once. I looked down at Chloe. She was standing near the VIP table, her arms crossed. She heard him deny her. She heard him call their wedding a fake. I saw the last remnant of love in her eyes extinguish, replaced by a cold, hard hatred. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply turned and signaled to the heavy velvet curtains at the side of the room. The curtains parted, and out walked a man. He wasn't a police officer. He wasn't a security guard. He was an older white man with silver hair, wearing a navy blue suit and a lapel pin that every person in that room recognized. Senator Robert Kensington. The room went silent. Dead silent. You could hear the ice melting in the glasses. Senator Kensington was a legend in D.C. He was a man who ate sharks for breakfast. And he was walking into this cheap hotel ballroom with a look of thunder on his face. He walked straight to Chloe. He put a protective arm around her shoulders. Then he turned his gaze to Julian. Julian, still standing on the stairs, looked like he was about to vomit. He had been using the senator's name for months to secure loans, claiming they were close, claiming he had the senator's blessing. Now the senator was here, and he didn't look like a blessing. He looked like the apocalypse. "Mr. Washington," the senator's voice didn't need a microphone. It carried the weight of authority. "I suggest you step away from that stage." Julian stumbled back down the stairs, tripping over his own feet. "Senator, sir, I can explain. This is a misunderstanding, Jasmine. She is crazy. She fabricated." The senator raised a hand. Silence. The doors at the back of the ballroom slammed open. This time it wasn't my security. It wasn't the hotel staff. A dozen men and women in blue windbreakers swarmed into the room. On the back of their jackets in bright yellow letters were 3 letters that end careers and ruin lives. FBI. They didn't run. They moved with the methodical precision of a pack of wolves encircling prey. They fanned out, blocking every exit. They moved toward the stage. They moved toward the VIP table. One agent, a woman with a stern face, stepped forward holding a megaphone. "Federal agents. Nobody move. This is a sealed crime scene." The crowd erupted into chaos. People started screaming. Investors were trying to hide their faces. Brad tried to duck under the table, but an agent grabbed him by the collar and hauled him up. Julian was trapped. He was standing between the stage and the table, spinning in circles. He looked at the screen showing his bigamy. He looked at the senator protecting the wife he defrauded. He looked at the FBI agents closing in. And then he looked at me. I was still standing at the podium. I hadn't moved. I looked down at him like a judge from on high. "Jasmine." He wailed, tears finally streaming down his face. "Jasmine, tell them it is a mistake. You are my wife. You have to help me." I leaned into the microphone one last time. "I am your wife, Julian," I said softly, my voice echoing through the chaos. "But unfortunately for you, so is she." I pointed at Chloe. "And unfortunately for you," I continued, "you stole from the wrong one." Patricia let out a shriek. She tried to run toward the back exit, clutching her purse. "Stop that woman!" an agent shouted. 2 agents intercepted Patricia. She struggled, kicking and screaming. "Get your hands off me! Do you know who I am? My son is a developer. This is my birthday party." They handcuffed her. The sound of the cuffs clicking on her wrists was audible even over the noise. They took her purse. They opened it. The agent pulled out the velvet box. He opened it. "My mother's pearls. "We have the stolen property," the agent announced into his radio. Julian watched his mother get arrested. He watched his world crumble. He fell to his knees, sobbing. But Brad was the one who couldn't let it go. As the agents were handcuffing Julian, Brad broke free from the agent holding him. He didn't run for the door. He ran toward the stage. He ran toward me. His face was purple with rage. He wasn't mad about the fraud. He wasn't mad about the bigamy. He was mad about the money. "Jasmine," he screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. "Jasmine, what the hell are you doing?" He pointed at the chaotic room, at the ruined gala, at the investors being questioned by the FBI. "You are ruining the family business," he shrieked, his voice cracking. "Do you have any idea how much money we were going to make tonight? We had deposits. We had cash. You stupid, jealous cow, you just burned down a gold mine." He truly believed it. In his twisted, greedy mind, the crime wasn't the theft. The crime was getting caught. He honestly believed that my intervention was simply an act of jealousy, not an act of justice. I looked at Brad. I looked at the man who had mocked my poverty for 2 years. "I didn't need the microphone for this. There is no business, Brad," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "It was a Ponzi scheme, and you were the CFO. I signaled to the agent behind him. "Take him." The agent tackled Brad, slamming him onto the red carpet. I watched them all. Julian on his knees. Patricia in cuffs. Brad pinned to the floor. The revelation was complete. The lies were exposed. But I wasn't done. The emotional destruction was finished. Now it was time for the financial execution. I looked at the terrified investors. I looked at the senator. I tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "if I could have your attention for one more moment, we have some business to settle." The room went quiet again. Even the FBI agents paused. "I am about to show you why you should never judge a book by its cover, or a wife by her silence." The FBI agents had secured the perimeter. The chaos had settled into a terrified silence. Julian was on his knees, handcuffed. Patricia was weeping near the exit, flanked by officers. Brad was pinned to the carpet, his face pressed against the floor he thought was too good for me to walk on. But I was not done. The law would handle their crimes. I needed to handle their egos. I needed to dismantle the very foundation of their arrogance. I stood at the podium, the microphone still in my hand. I looked out at the room full of investors, the senator, and the ruins of the Washington family. For 2 years, I said, my voice echoing through the ballroom, "You have all asked the same question. You whispered it at dinners. You joked about it at holidays. You asked Julian why he married me. You asked what I brought to the table." I looked down at Julian. He looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen. "You called me a data entry clerk, Julian. You called me a drain on your resources. You told your friends I had a poverty mindset because I clipped coupons and refused to let you buy a boat we could not afford." I paused, letting the words sink in. "You were right about one thing. I do work in data, but I do not enter it. I own it." I signaled to the back of the room. The heavy double doors opened again. This time a woman walked in. She was tall, wearing a white power suit that was sharp enough to cut glass. She carried a thick red leather portfolio. This was Jessica Adabio. She was not just my lawyer. She was the shark I kept in the tank for special occasions. Jessica walked up the stairs to the stage. She did not look at Julian. She did not look at the FBI. She handed me the portfolio. I opened it. The sound of the leather creaking was the only noise in the room. "Allow me to reintroduce myself," I said. I pulled out the first document. It was a certificate of incorporation. My name is Jasmine Washington, but professionally I am known as the majority shareholder and chairwoman of the board for Artemis Holdings. A gasp went through the room. Not just a gasp, a shockwave. Artemis Holdings was not just a company. It was a titan. It was the conglomerate that owned half the logistics supply chain in the Southeast. It was the venture capital firm that funded tech unicorns. It was the entity that everyone in that room, including Julian, dreamed of doing business with. Julian's mouth fell open. "Artemis, you. That is impossible. Artemis is owned by a trust established by my grandfather," I corrected him, "and managed by me." I looked at Brad. The agent pulled him up so he could kneel. He looked like he had seen a ghost. "Brad," I said, stepping closer to the edge of the stage, You work in finance. You know Artemis Holdings. In fact, you know them very well. Brad stammered. Everyone knows Artemis. It is a whale. Yes, I said. And this morning at 9 o'clock you sent an email. I pulled a piece of paper from the portfolio. To the hiring committee at Artemis Holdings, I read aloud. My name is Brad Miller. I am writing to express my desperate interest in the senior analyst position. I am looking to leave my current firm as they are facing liquidity issues. I bring a wealth of experience and a network of high net worth individuals. Brad's face turned the color of a bruised plum. You applied to work for me, Brad, I said, dropping the paper. You called me uneducated. You called me a charity case, and yet you were begging for a job at my company. I leaned in, and I read your resume, Brad. It was mediocre at best. Brad looked down, shame radiating off him in waves. But that is not all, I continued. Since I'm a diligent employer, I looked into your current firm. You mentioned liquidity issues. You were right. Your firm was about to go under. I pulled out another document, a deed of sale, so I bought it. Brad's head snapped up. What I bought the debt, Brad. Artemis Holdings acquired the distressed assets of Miller Financial Group at 10:30 this morning, which means effectively I am your boss. I smiled. And Brad, you are fired. Brad made a sound that was half sob, half scream. And since you no longer have an income, I continued mercilessly moving to the next document. We need to talk about your house, the one you bragged about. The one with the pool you said I was not allowed to swim in because I did not contribute to the maintenance. I held up a foreclosure notice. I bought that note too. You missed 3 payments, Brad. The bank was happy to sell the debt to a private investor. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. I suggest you start packing instead of partying. Brad collapsed. He slumped against the agent's legs, defeated. He had lost his job and his home in the span of 2 minutes, destroyed by the woman he had mocked over scrambled eggs. I turned my gaze to the back of the room where Patricia was still arguing with the agents. Bring her closer, I commanded. The agents marched Patricia to the front of the stage. She looked furious. You cannot do this to me, she screamed. I am an elderly woman. I have rights, Patricia, I said. You have the right to remain silent, but you clearly lack the capacity to use it. I pulled out a document that looked very familiar to Julian. You tried to evict me from my own home, Patricia. You and Julian forged documents to kick me out. You told me I belonged on the street. I held up a property deed. This is the deed to the Victorian mansion you live in. The one you claim has been in the Washington family for generations. Patricia stopped struggling. She looked at the paper. The truth is, Patricia, your husband, mortgaged that house to the hilt before he died. You have been paying interest only for 10 years. The balloon payment was due last week. Patricia went pale. How do you know that? Because the bank called Artemis Holdings to see if we wanted to add a historic property to our portfolio, I said. And I said yes. I looked at her with pity. I own your house, Patricia. I own the roof over your head. I own the chandelier you stand under to judge people. And unlike you, I do not tolerate thieves. I nodded to the agents. Evict her. Immediately. Change the locks tonight. Patricia wailed. It was a high, thin sound of total despair. She realized that she wasn't just going to jail for theft. She was coming out to nothing. No home, no legacy, no status. Finally, I turned back to Julian, the man of the hour. The visionary. Julian was weeping quietly now. He knew what was coming. He knew there was nothing left to hide behind. You told these investors you were building the Kensington Estates, I said, gesturing to the blank screen. You told them you secured the land on 4th Street. You told them it was prime real estate for luxury living. I walked down the stairs. I stood right in front of him. You are right about the location, Julian. It is prime real estate. That is why I bought it 5 years ago. Julian looked up, confusion mixing with his misery. But the records. It is owned by a shell company. The Green Paw Trust, I said. That is me. I pulled out the final document. It was a blueprint, but not for condos. I bought that land before I even met you, Julian. And do you know what I am building there? I held the blueprint up for the room to see. It is not a condo complex for the rich. It is a state-of-the-art animal rescue and rehabilitation center. I looked at Julian. You tried to sell condos on top of a future dog shelter, Julian. You promised these people luxury views, and I am breaking ground next week to build kennels for stray dogs. The room erupted in laughter. It was a nervous, shocked laughter, but it was laughter nonetheless. The great Julian Washington, the real estate mogul, had been trying to build a fantasy on land owned by his wife for charity. I leaned down close to his face. You wanted a legacy, Julian. This is it. You are the man who tried to con a billionaire, stole from a senator, and got outsmarted by a data entry clerk. I stood up and straightened my blazer. I turned to the senator. Senator Kensington, I said, my team has already issued refunds to every single investor in this room. Artemis Holdings is covering the losses. Your reputation is safe. The senator looked at me. He nodded, a look of profound respect in his eyes. Thank you, Ms. Washington. I turned to Chloe. She was watching me, her hand on her stomach. And Chloe, I said, the check for your father's campaign fund has already been wired, and I have set up a trust for the baby. That child will never need a father like him. Chloe mouthed the words, thank you. I looked at the FBI agents. He is all yours, I said. As they dragged Julian away, kicking and screaming, shouting that he was sorry, shouting that he loved me, shouting that we could make a deal, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I felt light. I walked back to the podium one last time. My name is Jasmine Washington, I said to the stunned room, and I am the CEO of Artemis Holdings. If you want to do honest business, call my office on Monday. If you want to run a scam, remember what happened tonight. I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a final resounding thud. The financial execution was complete, the bodies were buried, and the Queen was just getting started. The flashing lights of the police cruisers painted the front of the Grand Millennium Hotel in alternating shades of red and blue. It was a stark contrast to the warm golden glow of the gala inside a visual representation of the reality crashing down on the Washington family. I stood on the balcony of the hotel suite I had rented for the night, watching the scene unfold below like a tragic opera I had directed. Julian was the first to be brought out. He had lost his jacket. His shirt was torn at the collar, likely from his struggle with the agents. He wasn't walking with the swagger of a real estate mogul anymore. He was slumped over his head, hanging low, his hands cuffed tightly behind his back. The press had arrived, tipped off by my publicist. Cameras flashed, capturing the image of the golden boy in chains. They charged him with 2 counts of bigamy, 12 counts of wire fraud, and 3 counts of securities fraud. The federal prosecutor, a woman who played golf with my lawyer Jessica, told me later that the evidence was so overwhelming they didn't even need a trial. They had the marriage certificates. They had the bank transfers. They had the forged loan documents. Julian took a plea deal 2 weeks later. He tried to call me from the holding cell every single day. I never answered. I let the phone ring until the voicemail picked up, collecting his desperate apologies like trophies. In the end, the judge, a man who detested white-collar criminals who preyed on family, sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison. No parole for the first 12. I went to his sentencing. I sat in the back row wearing a white suit. When the gavel came down, Julian turned to look at me. He mouthed the word, please. I simply checked my watch, stood up, and walked out. I had a board meeting to get to. But Julian was just the head of the snake. The body still needed to be dealt with. Brad Miller thought he could weather the storm. He thought that getting fired from his firm was a temporary setback. He believed his own hype. He thought he was a financial wizard who could just walk across the street to a competitor and get a signing bonus. He was wrong. The morning after the gala, Brad tried to log into his Bloomberg terminal from his home office, only to find his credentials revoked. He tried to call his contacts at Goldman, at Morgan Stanley, at every hedge fund in the city. What Brad didn't know was that Artemis Holdings didn't just own logistics companies. We were a limited partner in almost every major financial institution in the state. I had sent a single confidential memo to the HR heads of every firm in Atlanta and New York. The subject line was simple: Bradley Miller. Risk assessment. Attached to the memo were the documents proving he had knowingly solicited funds for a Ponzi scheme. By noon, Brad wasn't just unemployed. He was radioactive. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that he tried to walk into a boutique firm in Buckhead for an interview 3 days later. The security guard stopped him at the turnstile. His picture was on the front desk with a red line through it. He was escorted out of the building in front of a lobby full of people. He lost the house I bought the note on. He lost his car. His wife Julian's sister Tasha filed for divorce the moment the money ran out. Last I heard, Brad was managing a shift at a car rental counter near the airport, renting out the kind of luxury cars he used to pretend he owned. And then there was Patricia. The eviction was scheduled for 9 in the morning on a Tuesday. I didn't go myself. I didn't need to see it. I had better things to do. But my property manager, a woman named Karen who took no nonsense, sent me the report. Patricia refused to open the door. She screamed from the upstairs window that she was a Washington, that this was her ancestral home. She didn't seem to understand that ancestry doesn't pay the mortgage. The sheriffs had to drill the lock. When they got inside, they found her sitting in the middle of the living room surrounded by boxes she hadn't packed, drinking tea from a chipped cup. She demanded to speak to the manager. Karen simply handed her the eviction notice and pointed to the door. They gave her an hour to gather her personal effects. She left with 2 suitcases and a coat. Everything else, the antique furniture, the grand piano, the heavy velvet drapes, was seized to pay off the outstanding debt she owed to Artemis Holdings. The neighbors, the same people she had terrorized with her homeowners association rules for 20 years, stood on their lawns and watched. They didn't wave. They didn't offer to help. They watched in silence as the queen of the neighborhood was dethroned. She moved into a 1-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city, funded by Social Security. I heard she tells her neighbors that her daughter-in-law stole her fortune. She tells them she is a victim of a corporate takeover. But nobody listens to the crazy old lady in apartment 4B. The dust settled. The legal battles ended. The silence returned. But this time, it was the silence of peace, not oppression. 3 months later, I sat in the cream leather seat of a Gulfstream G650. The cabin smelled of fresh leather and expensive orchids. We were cruising at 40,000 feet, flying from D.C. to Paris for Fashion Week. Sitting across from me was Chloe. She looked different. The fear was gone from her eyes. She was visibly pregnant now, glowing with the kind of strength that comes from surviving a fire. She was reviewing a contract on her tablet, her brow furrowed in concentration. We weren't best friends. We didn't braid each other's hair or talk about boys. We were partners. I had acquired a 20% stake in her father's consulting firm in exchange for the bailout. Chloe had taken over as the director of operations. She was ruthless, efficient, and brilliant. She was no longer the senator's daughter. She was a businesswoman. She looked up from her tablet and caught me staring. What she asked, a small smile playing on her lips. Nothing I said, reaching for my glass of vintage champagne. I was just thinking about the last time we were in a room together with Julian. Chloe let out a short, sharp laugh. The gala, she said, shaking her head. God, he looked so small when the agents took him. He was always small, I said. We were just standing too close to see it. She nodded, her hand resting on her baby bump. You know, Jasmine, she said softly, my dad asked about you yesterday. He said he has never seen a takeover executed with such precision. He wants to know if you are interested in running for office. I laughed, taking a sip of the champagne. The bubbles tasted like victory. Tell the senator I am flattered, I said. But I prefer to pull the strings, not be the puppet. Besides, I have an empire to run. Chloe raised her glass. 2 empires, she said. To the queens who build them, I replied, clinking my glass against hers. We drank in silence, the hum of the jet engine the only sound. We were 2 women who had been pitted against each other by a mediocre man. He wanted us to fight. He wanted us to be jealous. He wanted us to destroy each other so he could pick up the pieces. Instead, we destroyed him, and we built a fortress out of the wreckage. I looked out the window at the clouds below. I thought about the girl I used to be. The girl who entered data in a dark room. The girl who let her husband drive a car she paid for while she took the bus. The girl who stayed silent because she thought it was the only way to keep the peace. I realize now that silence wasn't weakness. Silence was a strategy. Silence was the time you spent analyzing the battlefield, loading your weapons, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Julian's mistake wasn't cheating. It wasn't stealing. It wasn't even the bigamy. His mistake was assuming that because I was quiet, I was blind. I turned back to the camera, looking directly at you. Never underestimate a silent woman. We are not silent because we are afraid. We are silent because we are loading the ammunition. We are silent because we are calculating the wind speed, the trajectory, and the exact moment your world will crumble. If you have ever had to move in silence to win your war, if you have ever turned your pain into power, let me know in the comments below. Type Queen if you loved this ending. And remember, the best revenge isn't just surviving, it is owning the bank that forecloses on your enemy. This is Jasmine Washington signing off from 40,000 feet. Stay powerful.